yes, it's true that he has been really famous, at least in Greece, but also worldwide. He's been translated a lot in more than 50 countries, as far as I know. But he's not really known for his travel poems. And this is what I was really interested in when I heard it, because okay, everybody knows him in Greece at least, but no one knows that he wrote these kind of poems. So he traveled here. He traveled to Italy for at least 7 times from 1976, which means after the restoration of democracy in 1974, because before he had been banished by the dictatorship, to the years before he died in 1990, visiting more than 20 places here. During his trips, either he wrote down notes as if he kept a diary with his impressions, or he composed relevant verses on the spot. And 3 collections of poems, Transfusion, The World is One, and The Statue in the Rain, came as a result of those verses Regis's trips to Italy inspired him, which formed the Italian triptych. In his Italian-themed poems, Regis depicts the cultural, natural, and urban landscape of the Bel Paese in a poetical way. He is also attracted by its everyday objects and people, as well as by the Mediterranean Sea. He travels throughout Italy, having the chance to admire its beauties. He visits a lot of different places. The three trips are described here. You see all the places he visits. He started in Sicily, went to Venice, Florence, Milan, and Rome in the first trip. Mondello and Palermo in Sicily again, and the second trip, Salerno, Costiera Amalfitana, Positano, Sorrento, Pompeii, Rome, Siena, and Milan in 1978. Milan and Bieno in Lombardy, the Apennine Mountains, Monte Marcello in Liguria, Siena in Tuscany, Castiglione del Lago, Perugia e Assisi in Umbria, e Ortone in Abruzzo in 1980. And in all these places, he visits famous or less famous monuments, and he especially admires statues, but also simple buildings such as a steeple. He visits the ancient theater of Taormina, an ancient temple in Catania, and the garden, the ancient Greek baths, squares with shops, bridges, the famous gold markets in Florence, and he writes about Florence. Right here, actually, you can also see some of the pictures he took during his trips. He's in the middle. On the left, it's his friend, his Italian friend, Nicola Crocetti, who is an editor in Milan and translator of his poems. He's still alive and working on his poems. And on the right, the Greek editor. City stopped in a time beyond, ochre brown, deep green, arched doors, rectangular windows. I stopped at the bridge with the gold shops. I looked at the river. It wasn't flowing. Only the statues shifted in the afternoon. I must tell you that these poems have not been translated in English, so any verses you see are... I tried to translate them. I'm not a translator, but I hope I managed to give you a hint of what he's writing. Well, here actually I think that this ochre brown and deep green refers to the color which is on the Duomo, because I saw this, which is a close picture, and I said, okay, this is the ochre brown and this is the deep green. Well, I'm not sure, but I guess. Anyway. So he mentions the statues. He loved statues, actually. He talked about the ones in the Loggia, Piazza della Signoria, such as the stone lion and the statue of Perseus, or the statue of David Apollo right opposite. He's delighted with the architecture in Positano, with Piazza di Spagna, Trinità dei Monti, Fontana di Trevi, and Piazza Navona in Rome, or the Vatican's museum. The Duomo, the Piazza Garibaldi in Milan, the towers in Pisa and San Gimignano. Pompeii is a special stop on Regis's trip to Italy. He dedicates 4 of the collections The World is One poems to the city, entitled Pompeii Red, Pompeii Death and Love, Pompeii Pleasure, and Farewell to Pompeii. He depicts the Villa of the Mysteries and the circular Roman baths, the altars, the pillars, and the frescoes. And he writes, doleful, erotic Pompeii, shady Villa of the Mysteries, collective circular baths for music, for sperm, and for roses, free pornographies on the walls of the brothels, altars, pillars, dreams, gutters, gardens. This brilliant red of the frescoes taught to the Byzantine and Renaissance ascetic artisans. And he feels as if he was watching through the keyhole of history. Ritus characterizes the ancient city of Pompeii as a museum, and he waves goodbye to that special place, which inspired him beautiful poems. Goodbye, Pompeii. Farewell, Pompeii. Thank you for the poems you gave me. Thank you for this silver key you hung on my chest to unlock the borders from the beginning, to enter again beauty and love. Yes, the world is always one, he declares, reaching one of the greatest conclusions of his poetry. Ritus also observes the people around him while visiting Italy and chooses many of them as characters to his poems. It is no coincidence that the very first verse of the trilogy begins as follows. People in a hurry, strangers. Our people, strangers. It is the first impression he captures in Catania, people who are strangers, foreigners, but look like acquaintances or even Greeks. He states and wonders, we lived here again years ago. Who are these? Where did they live? Catania seems familiar to him. He immediately recognizes the Greek features and similarities between the Sicilian and Greek natural and cultural landscape, and recalls the ancient years when Catania was a Greek colony, because the people look alike, the stones look alike. Nicola Crocetti, Ritus's Italian friend and translator, remembers that when they visited Taormina, Ritus was surprised at the resemblance between Sicily and Greece. He told his friend, I traveled so many kilometers far away from home to find myself at home again. The poet also notices the people's various everyday activities. This one is fishing, this one is playing the guitar, those are swimming, a girl in the red dress is smoking. Or, that one with the cap on the bench is sleeping, this one is reading the newspaper, this one with two glasses made of light doesn't see anything. Simple things and common people become significant in Ritus's poetry, as he consciously chooses to keep their memory forever. A young woman is smiling, a teenage traveler is biting an apple. People in a hurry pass through the shadows of the statues again. They look at their watch, they run, they go to work, they stop work in the evening, they sleep. Deaf-mute people in a tunnel, blind people on benches, a furious old man in a toilet, the women holding shopping bags, the prostitutes at night next to the round fires, or homosexual with long red wigs, a soldier, the postman, passengers of a ship. I have hundreds of people he mentions, a drunk man, a girl selling sacks made of tulle. All those people deserve to become memories captured in his poems. And the poet himself confesses to being a perpetual observer of both living and non-living things and their beauty. Another very important aspect in his poetry is the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. He was born and raised near the sea, and he also lived by the Mediterranean Sea, so it had always appealed to him, and he never neglected to praise it in his poetical compositions. So some of the poems of the Italian triptych depict the Mediterranean Sea. In the first collection, the Sea of Catania seems to be a very peaceful landscape, a symbol of peace, quiet, calm, stillness. He says, outside is the sea, a prolonged calm. Ritus must have carried on writing the poems in Catania sitting by the sea, as he did in Greece too. This is a photo in Samos, which is an island on the east Aegean Sea. his wife's homeland, actually. And he used to do that. He used to sit by the sea. He also had a special throne there built only for him after so many years sitting by the sea. And yeah, as I was saying, he would do so as often as he could in every place it was possible. So he writes his verses observing the people, the buildings, the trees, the mountain, but you can't keep up with the sea. He realizes after a while. The next day, Ritos leaves Catania to visit Taormina and its ancient theatre. And he writes, you will go up to the theatre to look at the sea. Ships pass, islands leave. So actually, the only thing he mentions about the theatre is that you will go to the theatre. And all the rest has to do with the sea or other things. After having admired his beloved sea, the poet returns to Catania for several days. And he seems rather upset as the wall hid from us the whole sea. Ritus always seeks to contemplate the sea, which provides him with the peace he longs for, the beauty he admires, the company he lacks. The representation of the Italian sea is transformed where Ritus transfers to Venice. The colors change, the image becomes darker, maybe sadder too, as he sees deep reflections in dark waters, and the city sings in its waters, the motorboats make a noise, napkins and cigarette stubs float. The water of the Venetian Sea seems dark to Ritos, almost black, as he repeats his impression in another poem he composed in Venice. Yet he can't resist singing it. He only stops writing about the sea when he stops seeing it. In 1978, when Ritos visits Mondello, the first poem he composes there begins with a night depiction of the sea and the reflection of the moon on it. Aglow the sea, slightly ironed by the hand of a young moon. Actually, this is Mondello. The next night, he writes the poem Travel Freedom after having visited Palermo. We have been traveling all day long to forgotten seashores, boats, swimmers, a red landmark, a naked woman. The children were shouting down by the sea, tiredness and love. Until the evening came with calm lights in windows and ships. Inside a deep lightness, rather sorrowful, satisfied by blue nothing. Day by day, he decides to represent in his poems the different towns he goes to. In 2 of 4 poems he dedicates to Salerno, he doesn't neglect to sing the sea and its beauties. Sunny day, houses, trees, ship ropes. The innumerable sea, all glowing in a carefree reconciliation. Oh, vast Italian Sunday, with wide words and high masts, smelling of salt and morning coffee. In some of his verses, love and sea intermingle. The beautiful women are still sleeping in the ship cabins, tired from swimming and love. The morning sea humidity dampens their untidy hair. Ritos admires the glow of the sea at the Amalfi coast, and in the poems written in Positano, the blue color of the sea is predominant, mixed with the other bright colors of the Italian landscape. Loads of arbors go downhill towards the sea. Boats pass fraught with grapes. And a little further, the little blue island, Ischia. This, I will put it sapphire on the ring I'm about to pass again, on the little finger, on the left hand of poetry, engagement. The poet is so impressed by the beauty of the Italian sea and the island of Ischia that would like to keep its image forever, as if he would only compose poems related to that from then and on. All the colors are spread on the landscape in beautiful proportions in the poem Positano, and it isn't only him who admires the sea, but so do the Italian girls through their windows. He adores the sea, and it is obvious in the next poem's last verses, in which he asks to be photographed in front of the glowing sea. Anyway, you can read that. And in the third collection of the Italian triptych, entitled The Statue in the Rain, Ritos refers to the sea only in the poems composed in Monte Marcello, in northwest Italy. And there in the morning, the poet has breakfast right opposite the sea and exclaims, good morning. He says good morning to the sea, and he addresses to it the moment he feels lost, dismembered, dissolved, and innumerable. Now, the last cultural aspect that no Mediterranean person would ever neglect caring about is food and culinary traditions, and so is Ritos, who considers them to be important since he chooses to describe or mention them in his Italian-themed poems. It is rather interesting to make a distinction between the food items he chooses to present in South and North Italy, since we can easily assume that this distinction reflects Italian or maybe Mediterranean culinary traditions. In his southern journeys, Ritos' culinary depiction is fish-based. He talks about people fishing and the fish markets in Catania, Mondello, or Salerno, giving us wonderful poetic imageries such as these. The shadows of the ages are not exchanged. They are united, they are dissolved, they leak. They are a red vase with red flowers on the dirty wooden counter between two huge slaughtered swordfish. Another image is that. Slaughtered fish, blood-stained planks, tuna fish, swordfish, octopuses, sea snails, sea urchins, artichokes. You will have to choose something. Impossible, he said, to choose, impossible. Just the necessities, a little meat, a loaf of bread, 5 apples. In Mondello, he writes about the night was fragrant with sea urchin. In the large terrace, we were offered fried eggplants and beer. In Costiera Amalfitana, fish are replaced by prickly pears. In the market, plenty of prickly pears in reed baskets. The girls are laughing in front of the doors. With small pocket knives, they are tearing the thick skin of the prickly pears. In Positano, he talks about red peppers, grapes, and lemons. In Sorrento, hazelnuts, pistachios, walnuts, lemons, and big strands of red peppers. In Florence, women carry shopping bags with fish again, but also with radishes and greens. While traveling north, Ritos talks about ice cream. For instance, in Venice, strawberry flavored, in Milan, hazelnut, and in Rome, ice cream cones. Last but not least, of course, coffee could not be missing in any Italian place, and neither could bread. However, are all these food items mentioned typical Italian? Does he talk about pasta or pizza, for example? He does not. Even if he mentions some pizzerias in Siena, I think it's, well, this is my opinion, but it would be safer to assume that he actually points out some of the main components of the Mediterranean diet, such as fish, vegetables, or fruit. In conclusion, Ritos differs from other poets who compose travel poems. Although he admires the Italian monuments in Sicily, Florence, Rome, Venice, Pompeii, or elsewhere, and he is particularly attracted to the statues, his Italian-themed poems mostly depict scenes of everyday life. He observes the Italian people, who may also be Greeks or strangers, the utilitarian objects they use and their actions. He praises the Mediterranean Sea and the natural, cultural, or urban Italian landscape, and gives several basic components of the Mediterranean culinary traditions. The world is one, Ritos declares while visiting Italy, and he recognizes the Greek civilization's transfusion into the Italian one. Is it because he realizes the similarities between his homeland and Italy? Is it because he is fully aware of the common historical and cultural heritage of the two countries? Or is it because both Italy and Greece are surrounded by the Mediterranean, the sea which simultaneously unites and divides countries, cultures, people, and peoples? The Greek and Italian civilizations and cultures intersect, interact, and in some places intermingle. Yes, the world is one, Ritos declares, seeming aware of this identity which is not local or national. It is not Italian or Greek, yet, if not universal, it surely is Mediterranean. Thank you.
I should want to present a short history of photography in the Mediterranean during the 19th century. In most selected throughout our collection, the collection of our museum, Fratelli Alinari. I don't know if you know, but Alinari is a very old company who work in photography, and the founders was three brothers, the brothers Alinari, and started in Florence in 1852, so before the unity of our country. So, but on the last of the 30 years, Alinari archive is enlarged with a lot of new material to create a really museum of history of photography. So, in the meantime, I should want to explain about our subject, but there isn't nothing about Alinari, because Alinari, yes, started so early, but at the beginning worked in Italy, and at the last of the century of the 19th century we can find it also in Greek and in Greece and for example in Spain, French and other. And so the brief history of photography is about other photography that we can have in our collection. Of course, not all the images are from our collection, but the most part. So, because I should want to focus with the origin, with the pioneer of photography, because the origin is intended to focus on how the cultural identity of the Mediterranean area had been made in the mid-19th century, precisely thanks to the photographic mission of the pioneers of photography. Photography allows to focus and compare multiply affinity, geographical, historical, cultural, and artistic, common denominator of the 22 countries bordering the Mediterranean basin. The Mediterranean is the most important center of development of human civilization, finding in the course of history and from ancient times the highest artistic and cultural expression that were capable people and continue to be the center of continuous exchanges between different cultures and traditions. From the origins of photography, the Mediterranean was a place chosen by photographers who photographed the countries bordering the sea, their culture, art, history, and landscape. But which is the question? Why? Of course, because in the Mediterranean area we have the history of our culture. The photography is born in French in 1839. And of course, in the Mediterranean area, there is the sun, so beautiful situation to do a picture, of course. Thanks to their work, these pioneers, we are able today to examine the Mediterranean as a whole, from Seville to Constantinople, from the Strait of Gibraltar to the Isthmus of Suez, that start the opening in 1869. And from Genoa to Malta. The extraordinary photographs of the 19th century thus become the visual documents of multiple common denominators that characterize the Mediterranean as a matter of belonging. It's a grand tour in the Mediterranean region through the first image taken by the photographer, travel science, the fortress of a 19th century venture to discover a great civilization of the past, even in difficulty to reach place so remote and sometimes inaccessible, and with the difficulties of the origins of photography. But in the meantime, they photographed in all the Mediterranean countries without exception. But before photography, what we can have? So we can start. Before photography, we have the painting, of course, or drawings or engraving to illustrate history and the Mediterranean countries, such as Egypt, in this case, for the Watteau, for the Battle of Pyramids. But later, of course, the landscape or the history is with the invention of the painter, of the artist, to produce also the most incredible situation, like this engraving on the 18th century, that we can find the Giza with a lot of pyramids, also 20 pyramids. It's non-reality. And so we have also some invention in art. But what happens? At the beginning, the French archaeologist Prosper Mérimée, who in 1834 was appointed to the post of Inspector General of Historical Monuments in France, on March 1839, remember the same date of the Daguerre invention of photography, with the Commission for Historical Monuments, realized that the newly invented photography could be put at the service of archaeology. And in its communication to the Academy of Science and Fine Arts in Paris, the chemist Arago stressed on one point: to copy the thousands of hieroglyphics that cover the great monuments of Thebes, Memphis, Karnak would require 20 years and legions of draftsmen. With a daguerreotype, one man alone can bring the fruition, and no errors this immense work. Photography, not just the technical progress permitted, gradually became the best means to reveal the Mediterranean, its diversity, but also its profound unity. The 6th November of 1839, Horace Vernet, the painter, Horace Vernet, arrived in Egypt with Frédéric Goupil-Fesquet and immediately began the first surveys. Before the end of the year, even Jerusalem is daguerreotyped, the Nazareth and Accra. These views engraved on wood are located in the optical excursion daguerrienne that Le Rebours began published in 1841 in Paris. I don't know if you know or you remember that the daguerreotype is only an unicum. It's not possible to print. It's the first process invented by Daguerre, and we need to transfer it to show everywhere in the world, to transfer it on engraving. And so the first publication was L'Excursion daguerrienne, is a promenade, photographic walking, about the most important place in the world, of course, in the Mediterranean. The first document to be played with a technique of daguerreotype were the Pyramid of Egypt, of course, with Frédéric Goupil-Fesquet, Jerusalem. I don't know where we are. Of course, we are in Luxor, so. And then we have Jerusalem. And of course, also the Acropolis of Athens, Italy, a lot. This is the photographer Pierre-Gustave Joly de Lobtenier. The shooting technique had not yet the limit to reproducibility. But, okay, we have original daguerreotype. In 1842, Giraud de Prangey, after spending a few highly productive weeks in Athens, headed towards Egypt. He spent the next 3 winter months in Cairo and Alexandria, and making daguerreotypes that constituted the early surveying photographs of Egypt. Although not the first demands the daguerreotype process in Egypt, Giraud de Prangey was certainly the earliest to produce such a comprehensive body of work. His output from Egypt, around 250 photographs in total, exceed the number he produced in any other country. None of the original daguerreotypes placed by Goupil-Fesquet or Joly de Lobtenier haven't been found. And here, no paper negative of Egypt were those made in 1849 by the French photographer Maxime Duchamp. Maxime Duchamp journalist, painter, photographer, introduced the use of the calotype technique that instead allowed, partly in 1849 for Egypt, and being half of the French Minister of Education, conducted a throat photographic campaign that was subject to geographical and reliefs. His photographs are distinguished by the rigor of the shoots, focused on the subject and not on the archaeological landscape. In 1849, we founded Maxime du Camp in Alexandria on his well-documented travel with Gustave Flaubert. Photographer, template, and Egyptian hieroglyphs on health on the Académie des Inscriptions de Paris. Du Camp is the first photographer in Egypt to produce a paper negative, and Gustave Flaubert was the first traveling companion of a photographer, writing with humor about the interminable period to waiting required to exposure and development, of course. Before long, John Barclay Green also became a calotopist. His precious, admirable research was cut short by his premature death at the age of 24. He had, however, succeeded in changing the method and manner of seeing, photographing, for example, the man on Colossus also from behind, at a time when everything was seen frontally. The English photographer Francis Frith, with his assistant Frank Mason-Good, undertook numerous trips and produced a complete survey of Egypt. He used the collodion process, a major technical achievement in hot and dusty conditions. We can see several images of Francis Frith, that is a very important photograph for the Mediterranean area. For all the images, we can do this thing. Sometimes we think to be in front of timeless images, and with the same style, because the photography is the medium to realize this common manner to see the world, to produce photography. So we had other interesting images of Francis Frith in the Valley of the Kings. But start another photograph. Arrived in Egypt from India before 1860. The Venetian photographer Antonio Beato, who settled in Cairo and then Luxor, after collaborating with his brother Felix. Felix was in Japan. And he realized a very important school of photography in Yokohama. And also his brother Felix, and with James Robertson, with his brother-in-law, who had met in Malta, and who had produced very interesting images during the war, because very important, of course, are the photography campaign in Cairo and in Giza about Antonio Beato that you can see. But I should want to remember that the first war reportage is in 1855 of many photographers. We can find James Robertson. This is a calotype negative, original by Robertson in the Crimea War. And both Robertson and Beato, we can find both in Jerusalem and in Athens, the view of Parthenon, and another time in Egypt. But the French also did their part, creating a gallery of personages that paralleled the panorama of monuments. Henri Béchard, like this one, very interesting portrait of a person. We are on the right, we are at Cairo. On the left, we are in India. And this one is a very interesting shoot in Cairo of Henri Béchard. And we can see, for example, Hippolyte Arnoux, habitual visitor to the building yard of the Suez Canal. Remember that we start opening in 1869, and here in images on Egypt. And Hippolyte Arnoux at the Suez Canal. You can see the date of opening. And the Bisson Frère, that we can find it, of course, the same in the same Crimea war, but the Bisson Frère was around the Mediterranean area, also in Italy. You can see, for example, the same in Rome, in Venice. And another is a photograph is Adolphe Brown. We are in France, in Arles. Also Adolphe Brown and Bisson was invited for a celebration of the opening of the Suez Canal. And we can find another important photographer is Felix Steiner, who had already taken a trip to Egypt in 1851 as a calotypist. Other British citizens in the red included the Reverend George Bridges, mentioned for Italy, John Shaw Smith, Francis Bedford, who accompanied the Prince of Wales in 1862, and above all, Francis Frith. In 1851, we found Eugène Piot published a book of photography about Italie monumentale that was a sensation, but in Italy there are also other photographs. But it's a particular photo, a very intense photo in Florence. We can see here the original, the real David of Michelangelo. Yeah, because later, so you can see the original big boys, but because later was placed in the gallery of Accademia. And then other images for a cemetery of Pisa, but we can find also the Edouard Delessert, Swiss Delessert. He worked in Sardinia so early, in 1854. He realized a very important photographic campaign in Sardinia, a Swiss photograph in Sardinia, in Italy, in Japan, in India, in China. All the photographs is traveling. So changed the situation. You see, if you think, it's so changed now. And so there is a incredible number of shoots when the history of photography is not so easy to produce it, and also it's not so easy to realize photographic campaign. The English sculptor Jones in Naples, also with other photographers like George Wilson Bridge, in a tour from Florence, Naples, Palermo, Malta, Rome. In Rome, we have a very important school of photography with a great group of photography that who meet in Caffè Greco as Norman, Constant, Caneva by Veneto, and Tuminello. For example, in the Alionari collection, we have a great collection of salt paper by calotype of Giacomo Caneva, not only views like this one, but, for example, so beautiful situation of person. You can see that the child is moved, so the images does not remain in the shoot. Because of course, we have the original photography, so we attend a lot of time to press the button, I say, the Eastman. So, for example, for the daguerreotype, 20 minutes or more. With the calotype, less, 10, 15 minutes. And also the collodion process, 2-3 minutes. It's a lot wait for a portrait, for example, is a terrible time. Oh, another very important photograph is a German, Giorgio Sommer, and it's a very incredible place also for the Grand Tour that you signalize, of course, very important, but also the place so famous like Pompeii. All the photographers come to visit to do the shoot in Pompeii. Every photograph, not only Alinari or Sommer or Fried, all the photography when they arrived in Florence at the first, very important to photograph. Our history, no? So return. Of course, photograph born in Europe, architecture is very important for the photographer. Somewhere in Sicily for the Taormina Greek theater. And we found also another photograph, an English photograph, Clifford, in Spain, worked during the 1852, the same date of our foundation in Florence. Clifford realized a very beautiful landscape, described with exceptional modernity of vision. Now, I should want to explain about Gustav Regresa, the great French photographer who taught the rudiments to the calotype to Maxime Duchamp, the French photographer that you've seen in Egypt. Also, Gustav Regresa arrived in Egypt from Sicily because he was in Sicily during the Garibaldi mission, and so he produced also a very important photograph, and not only about the situation of war in Palermo and Sicily, but also Gustav Regresa was the first photographer who produced a portrait of Giuseppe Garibaldi in the same period in Sicily. And we have also another photograph, very incredible. It's a German Emil Brook, an Egyptologist. He's the deputy conservator of the Museum of Bulak, the first to photograph the mummy scene of the pharaohs. Mention must also be made of the Italians Carlo Naia, Francesco Quadrelli, and Alessandro Brignoli, but also the Greek Paradis or the Armenian Legekian. There's a very incredible portraits like these portraits of a woman in Tunisia. Or also we are in Sudan with the same photographers. But we have an incredible list of names of photography. I can say to you about the Tark Seba, who worked together with the Frenchman Polycarpe Juliet. You can see this one, and the Greek Zanzaki brothers. We have here in the Suez Canal, and the Turkish Abdullah Frere, or Abdullah brothers, official photograph of the Sultan in Constantinople, and as such, active in Egypt and in the eastern province of the Ottoman Empire. You can see in Istanbul and here in Egypt, very beautiful images. But is the true suit to attract photographers. Daguerre said that it requires at least 20 minutes of exposure in Paris is accelerated 10 times by the sun of Egypt. Giraud de Prangerie was also in Syria and Asia Minor. At the same time, various photographers depicted Syrian and Palestine. Ernest Benek in 1852, James Graham, and August Salman in 1854. The Damascus door in Jerusalem, and here we have also the Mosque of Omar in Jerusalem. But we can find other photographs. For example, here in Cairo, Wilhelm Hammersmith, and but the first images of Petra in Jordan is by George Skinkeat. It is the beginning was in 1844, but it is an engraving from a daguerreotype of George Skinkeat. So incredible images, and of course in Palestine we can find another time Maxime Ducamp, of course also Francis Frith, the Italian Giacomo Brogi in 1868, like this one, or later a lot, like this other Italian photograph like Fiorillo in Jerusalem. But I should want only to say the last other interesting grand tour, Gabriel de Rumin, a Russian noble who settled in Lausanne, Switzerland, accompanied the Grand Duke Constantine, son of Nicholas I, in a journey in 1859, and that began in Nice, continued to Genoa, Naples, Palermo, and Malta, Athens, Constantinople, and then Jerusalem. But we should dedicate the time to explain also the work of Felix Bofill, Protestant of Cevennes. He was 29 in 1816 when he took part in Napoleon III expedition to protect the Maronite Christians from the Jews. And Bofill is a photograph of the origin of a widespread iconographic diffusion. So it's all. Thank you.